Okay, we do have a quorum now, so we can get started. And so I'll call the meeting to order and welcome everyone here for one of our 2 monthly meetings. The trustees who are not here yet, we're expecting Lena Oldperson, and both Mike Smith and Grace Decker had other obligations, so they couldn't be here tonight. But we do have a quorum, so we'll stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any requests from any trustee to change the order or somehow revise the agenda that has been provided to us all? Seeing none, then we'll go ahead and follow the agenda as it's been printed. And because of the long Christmas break, we had a bit of a gap in meetings, and therefore there are no board minutes available for approval. So now we come to number 5A, which is public comment regarding non-agenda items. It's any item that we won't be discussing later during the meeting that anyone from the public wants to bring to the board's attention. See no one racing to the podium, then we'll go ahead and move on to 6A, Health Insurance Trust Fund Report. Included in the packet is the routine Health Insurance Trust Fund Report for the month of November and the month of December, beginning on page 4, and that's for information only. And then B is the high school activities report for the fall of 2019, and it is found on page 6, and there will be no oral report, but it is available for your reference. Then we move on to 6C, which is the superintendent's report. Superintendent Watson.
Thanks, Chair Holland. I just have 3 items this evening, so just really appreciate everyone's participation in the strategic planning process that happened on January 23rd. I thought it was very well attended, not only by district staff, but also community members, so felt pretty good about that. And we have our next one on February 25th, and then the final one is, I believe, March 20-something, can't remember. 25th, okay. So looking forward to that. We also have some school visits coming up I just wanted to inform the board about. So on the 6th of February, we have the middle school visits, so Porter at 8:45, Meadow Hill at 9:45, Washington at 10:45. Please feel free to join us on those visits. Just an awesome opportunity to see what's going on. I know Porter is still really deep into construction, so it'll be a good opportunity to kind of check out some of that stuff. The final thing I have is somewhat of a congratulations for Elise. She didn't even know I was going to congratulate her. But the board, you'll recall that the board approved a grant application for us. This is one of those strange grants. So this one was, when I say strange, the way it was allocated. But this was a CTE grant that we applied for, and there's $750,000 available for the whole state. And Elise, tell me the day that you had to apply. Was it December 1st? I can't remember. It was sometime in January or December. I can't remember, but it was one of those situations, much like the other one, where we had to be on the button, ready to hit the button at 8 o'clock. And Elise had several members of her staff all ready to hit the button. So as I said before, there were $750,000. There were 33 school districts that applied. The money was gone within the first 30 seconds, is what I was told. We actually came in at number 9 and number 10 because we applied for our elementary district and for our high school district. So we came in at number 9 and number 10. The money got cut off at number 9. So we just barely made it in. But because application number 10 was also our application, they're allowing us to spread the money between the 2 districts. So thanks, Elise, for being Johnny on the spot with the button and getting our application approved. So Elise, if you don't recall, Elise had proposed to the board this grant opportunity for career and technical education. The money has to be spent in that area. One of the ways that we know we can support the program is to continue to fund our career and technical education coordinator, but also provide more opportunities for middle school students in the area of career and technical education. So those are just some of the things that she's considering, but we did receive at least partially funded grants, so thanks, Elise.
The total amount is $188,000, so it'll go a long way, so it's good.
Thank you. And now we move on to 6D, which is to recognize our outgoing trustee, Elliot Duggar. Elliot couldn't be here tonight because he was traveling to Atlanta. I did talk to him and made him aware of the fact we'd be acknowledging his service for the past 2.5 years, and we made a deal that I'll take him to lunch when he gets back. And so it's a beautiful plaque that the district has prepared for me to give him when he comes back, and we'll have lunch together, and I'll thank him personally for his service. But during that conversation, he did want to say thanks to everyone who made his service so positive and so productive, and he only had glowing words for both everyone in the district and his fellow trustees, so he wanted me to pass that along to you as well. So I have done so, and I will let him know that I've done that when we have lunch when he gets back. So thank you for Elliot. We'll clap for him anyway. Now we move on to 7, which is the consent agenda. These are items that are perfunctory and we see on a routine basis. Tonight, there's only one. It's an elementary action item because it's acknowledging the MCPS students' attendance agreements, and therefore, there won't be any board discussion about it, although we can take public comment. So is there a motion from an elementary trust or K-12 trustee to acknowledge the attached list of elementary students requesting to attend other school districts? Moved by trustee Lorenzen. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Kendall. As I indicated, we don't have any board discussion, but is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all K-12 trustees in favor of the motion to acknowledge the attached list of elementary students requesting to attend other school district, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all K-12 trustees present. And then we move on to a report on the results of the Montana High School Association annual meeting proposals. And I do want to thank Dana Oliver. When he last gave us the update going into the meetings, I had asked if he'd give us, an update about what happened, and he did so in a very timely fashion. So I'll turn it over to Superintendent Watson.
So, yeah, I appreciate the opportunity just to share out. I'd asked Mr. Rettig to come to the podium. So, ironically, Dane was unable to make the annual meeting because of a prior commitment. So Mr. Rettig attended the annual meeting and served as the rep for Sentinel. But we had, remember that at the annual meeting, we have one vote for every school. So we had reps from the other schools as well. But Mr. Rettig seemed most appropriate to come and sort of report on what happened at the annual meeting. I was a little bit surprised to see some of the things that did pass. For example, the proposal related to transformational learning did pass. So I thought Mr. Rettig could just kind of go through what passed and answer any questions you might have.
Thanks. And Mr. Rettig, if you press the red button.
There we go. I apologize. First one is the transformational leadership. That proposal passed, meaning we have the requirement of the brick and mortar students need to be in, according to Missoula County Public Schools, 20 hours per week in the classroom. With transformational leadership being passed, that could change depending on how the school board wants to look at that. So as we move forward, that's something that the district administrators, under the guidance of the school trustees, can look at to update our policy. So that was the first one that passed. Second one, not a big one, warm-up shirts with names on the back. That one passed, so schools can, students can wear their names on the back of their shooting shirts. Proposal number 3 was any type of recruiting, which is irony that I'm presenting this, but coaches can be suspended up to 2 games now if in violation of any type of recruiting. Number 4, if it's a co-op, team that wins a trophy, the state is only going to provide 1 trophy. The district would be responsible providing any additional trophies for the co-op team. So the state pays for 1, the district pays for the remainder of the trophies. And another one, It's not a huge one, but the golf coaching rule was amended to coaches can now coach from tee to green, meaning the coaches can have contact with their players from the time they tee off all the way up until the green. So that was amended. And then the last two that do have a pretty good impact on the district is girls wrestling was added as a sanctioned sport beginning next year in Montana. And also on top of the girls wrestling was boys powerlifting was added as a sport. Questions or?
Any questions for Ryan?
Can I add one more thing? All right, I wanted to add one other piece of relevant information specific to the last two. So the Montana High School Association passed those bylaws which allow us to add sports, specifically in the areas of girls wrestling and boys powerlifting. However, there is a district policy related to this and how we add sports, and it specifically states, policy 3510, that in establishing interscholastic programs, the board directs administration that recommends sports activities are based on interest inventories completed by students. So that tells me that in order for us to add sports to our program, we would need to start with interest inventories of our students. So that's in one of our policies, and so I just wanted to point out that, you know, these, although these passed, doesn't necessarily mean that we have to add those activities, but we definitely could consider those.
Any other questions for Ryan? Trustee Lorenzen and Trustee McDonald?
Your first one, you talked about the transformational learning. So I understand that it's optional. We don't have to change our policy, right, just because they changed, or is there a law behind this as well?
Correct, we would not have to change our policy. But, I mean, with it being out there, I don't know, it's something we may want to revisit.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, I don't want to belabor the point, Mr. Rettig is correct. The law that was passed related to transformational learning is that we can actually get some A and B money for students that are enrolled in a transformational learning program. So that was the law related to that, but it wasn't specific to activities. The activities was a piece that MHSA took up and made the rule change.
Okay, can you just remind me of the, what the penalty of recruiting, what that consisted of?
It was a $100 fine as of 2 weeks ago, and when they amended this rule, it's now up to a 2-game suspension for a coach.
Okay, I guess what I was wondering is what, you know, I don't know if I was here when this was going on, I recall it, but what is so the coaches aren't able to recruit?
No, coaches shouldn't have any contact with players outside of their own team. They shouldn't be talking with players outside of their own program.
Any other questions? It's information only. Any public comment? Seeing none, thank you for taking time to be here tonight and giving us the update.
No, thank you for having
And
me.
thank you for representing one of our schools there. Now we move on to new business under Finance, Operations, and Maintenance, which is to approve the agreement associated with the tax increment financing remittance. And Pat's not here. He had the good fortune of getting a permit, so he's hiking the Grand Canyon this week. And so I think Superintendent Watson can walk us through, and we've been moving through this process because it's a multi-stepped process in order to actually approve the TIF.
Yeah, I won't add a whole lot to the agenda item. What I would tell you is that the last meeting, the board approved the acceptance of the tax increment finance district, and Pat sort of walked you through how we were, what we were going to do with those, that remittance and how we were going to add it to our accounts. The only thing that didn't happen at the last meeting is the city did not have the actual agreement finished, and so we weren't able to present the agreement. So now the agreement has been drafted and is finished and signed by the city. The numbers to check that we wanted to just verify on page 23 of your packet. If you look at the very bottom, Missoula High School District, that's the same number that Pat had reported to you at the previous meeting that we would receive. And then on page 24 at the top, Missoula Elementary District, those two numbers are accurate and match with what we've reported to the board. And everything else is very similar to the TIF agreement that we received last year. So what we're asking is for board approval so that Marcia can sign as the chair of the board.
Any questions? Seeing none, then the recommendation is that the trustees approve the attached TIF remittance agreement and authorize the execution of the agreement as we have discussed. And so is there a motion to do so? Moved by trustee Wake, seconded by, I can't say, trustee Oldperson. Is there any board discussion? And again, I just want to thank Pat and the business office for working through this and making sure that, we've looked at all the appropriate documents and have worked everything out with all the moving parts. So thank you to them again. Is there any other public discussion, or board discussion, sorry? Any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of the motion to approve the attached TIF remittance agreement and to authorize its execution as contemplated, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. And I just overlooked, normally at our second board meeting of every month, we don't have student trustee reports, but because we have two trustees here, I don't know if there's a small report you want to give. Otherwise, we appreciate you came and you're attending and listening. So you're good with no reports? Okay. Just wanted to give you the opportunity. So now we move on to 9A2, which is to approve additional funding for administration office remodel, and it looks like it's going to be a combination of Superintendent Watson and Burley who will give us an update. It's a pretty long explanation and background information, so I hope everyone had a chance to read that first.
So I'll introduce the item and then give Burley a chance. We also have Tyson Watson here this evening from Holtang, which is our owner's construction representative. So he also would be happy to share information about the request for increased costs. What I would explain to you is that we did have contingency money built into this budget. However, there were some unforeseen items, which Burley will outline, that we didn't realize till we got into the project. Kind of typical for remodels, but Burley will explain those. But we quickly saw that our contingency money would be eaten up fairly quickly, and we're not completely through the project, obviously. So our request this evening is for additional funding for this project. In addition to that, we're asking that the board let us proceed with the project, and then as you can see in the recommendation, we would come back and have a board discussion on the funds. But Burley, why don't you talk briefly about what some of the cost overruns were and kind of the process you used?
Yeah, thanks. So if you look at on page 2 there, about almost all the way down at the bottom, the last a couple sentences from the end, it kind of identifies a lot of the main players: asbestos removal, structural upgrades, fire sprinkler code upgrades, permitting costs. There's some electrical issues. There's a prevailing wage issue, and I'll explain these a little bit more detail. Some extended general conditions, and then we had some energy things we wanted to accomplish, and then some boardroom upgrades that we felt necessary to have over there. The one thing I'll start with is the prevailing wage. So when this project went out for bid, in the bid documents, they actually had the incorrect prevailing wage spreadsheet or wages attached to it. And so when the bids came in, they were ran through the wrong prevailing wage, which was a couple years old. And so they had to go back and meet with their subcontractors and pull all of the most current prevailing wage numbers into the contract. And it ended up being about a $27,000 addition to the project. Structural was another. We had, I know some of you trustees visited over there, and I'm not sure if you didn't notice, but it was really crazy evident. So at the boardroom up above, there's a mezzanine up above it, and there was really very little structural attached to the foundation to support that mezzanine. Once they got the demolition taken care of and looked at it, they realized they had to add some more support. The same was very true for the kitchen area. So once they kind of dove into the kitchen area, they opened up some of the walls and they found what's called lattice framing. It basically looks like very thin metal framing that held up those walls and is no longer current with building code. And so that was a very big cost. That was about, apologize, that was about $50,000 to remove all that structure and put in new code current framing. Asbestos, we did remove all asbestos that we had when we inspected the facility before construction began. But as with the bond projects, once you start taking in into walls and lifting up other different types of flooring, you start finding, or removing more walls, you'll find a little bit more asbestos. So, and then there was a little bit more asbestos in a boiler that was missed as well that we had to remove. Some energy upgrades. There is some, this is a little bit optional, but we had an alternate that was to replace all the drywall around the inside exterior walls. We decided not to take that originally, but once we got into the project and we discovered how bad a shape they were, and that we were gonna just go back and repair them, but the cost basically became neutral to replace or to repair. Once we replace them, it's in our best interest to do energy upgrades. So right now, the walls are sitting about an R6, and with the additional cost of about $20,000, we'll make those walls an R21. So our buildings will be much more efficient with that addition. Fire sprinkler was really the largest part of the cost that we didn't account for. We worked probably since about August, September with fire marshal and fire contractors to install the systems to look at what the best, most inexpensive way to do it. And really what it was is the heads that were in the building were no longer code compliant. They were sort of required to replace all existing heads that we had planned on keeping. And then the soffits in both building A, or the north building and the south building, had no fire suppression system. And the fire marshal just couldn't get around the building code to not allow us to add suppression to those systems. So that was about $140,000 just in that cost to do that. So during that time, it did hold up some of the project, which kind of leads into additional general conditions. So we estimated about a month, about 25 days that the project was held up, getting the fire suppression system going. At about a little over $1,000 a day, that's a $25,000 charge to kind of slow that up. So that's the general conditions that we were talking about. And then the boardroom upgrades, which would be more of a circle, half circle type fixture, furniture, and and then a new PA system, wireless mic system, which I think we all could agree that is very old and outdated. So it's really something to add to that boardroom. And it won't be like a city chamber, the city council chambers. It's not gonna be anything fancy. It's really gonna be just a very nice, in the middle of the road type thing. So, but we felt like we needed to keep this building and this room set up to where we could have some professional development here in this space as well, and keep this furniture here, and potentially even the mic system over here, and continue to operate other things that we see fit. That's pretty much the quickest version I have of all those, and I know it's a lot of information, but I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding those as well.
So Burley, I know one of the discussions we had early on is areas that we cut back, because I think it was pretty obvious that we were eating into our contingency. So I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about any of those areas that we've made cuts. I know there was a bathroom that was planned, that was cut, and I know some of the casework. So can you elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, those were, so we had a bathroom on, attached to the print shop on that south end. And then we were also looking at putting a bathroom up in the superintendent's office. So those numbers came back, oh, I apologize, and another bathroom up kind of by the boardroom to allow another bathroom up there. And so we had to reduce the two bathrooms, one in the superintendent's office and then one in by the print shop area. We looked at flooring. We reduced some costs in our flooring, and we're still working through that, even as recent as today, trying to reduce some dollars in flooring. We reduced some paint. I mean, we've really got down to the nitty-gritty in this project. We've eliminated some doors, we've eliminated some windows. We've worked through the HVAC system to see where we could reduce some costs there. And so, we, even from I'm sorry, I don't know, went through the flooring. So like one of the biggest savings we're hoping to get, and this is what we're working through today, is the flooring in the print shop. We're going from a tile, it was like a ceramic tile, into a carpet. So we're hoping to save a bunch of money there. And we'll continue to value engineer through this entire project. It's a little more difficult to do that in a hard bid project rather than a general contractor construction management, which is kind of what we've done with a lot of our bond projects, but it's still doable. We're still looking at how we can reduce some costs in the lighting. And that's one area we've been able to do some savings in other bond projects, is when you an architect will spec one fixture, and then we can get with the contractor and look at equal fixture for a lesser price. So it's a good way to save some money as well. So we'll continue to do that.
And then just mention too about the furniture. So I know that you've encouraged us to repurpose our furniture. And then I don't know if you want to talk about the casework. I know there was a lot of discussion that went around the types of cabinetry.
Yeah, so, yeah, thanks for reminding me on that. We did do some casework reductions, quite a bit actually. And ultimately we had, I think, an okay savings in there. I don't know that, again, it wasn't a large savings, but we did have some savings in that. We looked at every single piece that we were putting in there. And then no one is, unless they have budget in their own departments, will be getting new furniture. We'll be taking over everything we currently have. And so there'll be some savings there as well.
Yeah, I would just comment, just to kind of wrap it up here, from the administrative recommendation. What Pat had reminded me is that when the project went out to bid, when we first proposed the project, we were looking at possibly an $11 million price tag. And then that came down to 8, and then when we actually got the bid back, we were just under 6. So I realize that this additional piece of request that we're asking will put us over 6 million. However, I feel like, probably now is the cheapest time to do some of this work while we have a crew there and we're working on this. So I think it's best to do this rather than postpone any part of the project for a future date. So that was one piece of my recommendation. The other thing is that, I'm sorry that Pat's not here this evening, but he elaborated with me areas that, funds that we could use to cover the additional 365,000. And so I'd be happy to talk about any of those if you have questions. And then the last thing I'll say is there is still going to be contingency left in the budget, and our hope is at the end of the project, we'll have some of that contingency, so maybe the cost won't truly be 365,000.
Yeah, so we'll still have about $130,000 left in our contingency. The other thing I'll say is, when we've been working through these numbers really since December, and as I mentioned, there is a general conditions cost in this. And in early January, we were looking at bringing this to you, the first board meeting, And we weren't where we needed to be yet to give you guys all the information you needed. So I asked Jackson Contracting Group that if anything's gonna hold us up before we go to the board, I need to know now so that we don't have extended general conditions to cost us more money if we waited till this board meeting at the end of the month, and we didn't have any. But going forward, some of these decisions, we have to make these decisions, such as the energy upgrade on the walls, or on the exterior walls, or the interior exterior walls. Those are kind of on hold. They're not costing us any more money at this point in time. But if we pushed it any further along, it's going to start costing us more money.
Any questions for trustee Newbold? Oops.
So I think you started to answer one question about the contingency, because I was trying to do the math and figure out, will we still have a contingency, or is this in addition? And math is not my forte. But the discussion about the other sources to fund this, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so we have, what's interesting is we used some permissive levy this year as part of the, if you recall, in July when we brought the $6 million budget to you, we used some permissive levy both at the elementary district and the high school district to cover a piece of that. We assumed that the project was going to be done this fiscal year, but because it's going to go into next fiscal year after July 1, we'll have access to some more permissive levy money. So the recommendation that Pat would have if he were here would be to use $300,000 from the high school district permissive levy, and then the remaining 65 from the TIF remittance in the elementary.
Any other questions? Trustee Lorenzen?
I know I emailed this question, but last time we decided not to do any kind of intercap loan, but money is really cheap right now, and I wondered if you had looked into whether it's possible to borrow money after you've started.
Yeah, and Pat had done that. I think it is still a possibility to do an intercap loan, and so an intercap loan is a low-interest loan. Pat was estimating a 15-year loan, 3% interest, $365,000. That would be about $30,000 per year. And so one of the things for the board to consider, if we were to enter into an intercap loan, we would need to have a funding stream to cover that loan payment. And there's some options there. I don't want to pre-assume how we would cover that loan payment, but there are some options. For example, some lease, some lease money that we're receiving from a variety of different buildings that we might be leasing. We could cover cost of an intercap loan. I think where the board will have to make the call, is it worth it to do the intercap loan and pay the interest on that over 15 years versus using some other, money that we have now to pay the 365. So again, apologize, Pat couldn't be here, but I know he'd be willing to sort of weigh out all those different options with you in a future meeting.
Any other questions? Well, I have a few if I can ask. So Burley, when we talk about the boardroom, really, it's a multi-purpose room because right now in the admin building, there's room number 14 that is used for a lot of training. And would that room in the admin building, or what will be the new building for the school district, would that serve purposes well beyond just twice a month board meetings?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we would definitely use that as a multi-purpose room. We envisioned that the board table, so to speak, if you will, would be movable, and we'd be able to clear it out, move it around, and use it for different types of meetings, for sure.
And so is the cost of keeping this room also available, so this furniture, which has some parts falling off, would stay here, and so the two purchases for the multi-purpose / boardroom would be a sound upgrade, so our sound doesn't get lost every now and then in a meeting, and then the furniture to make it usable for many things?
Yeah, so we would definitely leave the stuff here that so we could continue to use this space for any other options we might have for it. We've looked at a wireless mic system, which includes this new sound system and the microphones and charging dock stations, and that's about installed. That's about $52,000. And then we've looked at this boardroom circle that would likely have to be custom built, including new chairs. Our chairs here aren't much better than our tables, but includes new chairs, includes a new podium, which that's really not a large expense, but it's going to be custom built. And we've looked at the market. We've talked to some furniture folks out there and had some bids, and we feel like they really didn't meet the needs that we were looking for, and so we would look at a custom, which really isn't a larger. It's probably a cost neutral.
Trustee Lorenzo.
So what is the cost for the board table and chairs and the podium?
So the entire cost was, we had $15,000 for the chairs, the trustee chairs and the lecture. We have $20,000 for the table to be built, the trustee table. $52,000 to microphone, speakers, audio system. $52,000.
When's the last time we invested in all this?
No, I'm sorry if I said 100. It's $52,000 for the microphone AV system to be put in there. So we just had that price last week. Actually, about a year and a half ago, we priced it at about $40,000. And so it's a total of $92,000.
Any other questions? I had another one that I was thinking of. So if I'm understanding the recommendation is that there's money available through different revenue streams to cover this $365,000, $888, or, that amount of money. The question at a later time would be, if an intercap loan turns out to be the best way to go, even though we're paying interest over 15 years, and if we have money that we could spend right now, we would avoid the interest costs, but that if it turns out that's the best way to proceed and leaves us with monies available for other things. So the question tonight is, do we go ahead knowing that there are sources of revenue? And a question a little bit down the road would be, and perhaps when Pat's back, to have a separate board agenda discussion about which revenue source would cover this additional budget. Okay. Anyone else have any other questions along that line? Trustee.
The information that we have here in the agenda packet says that the board would be able to determine or approve specific funding sources at a subsequent board meeting. How much time would it take, and how much time would when would we have to approve that?
I think the way the recommendation is worded, we're asking for permission to go forward with the project and not cause any more delays, and then we would probably come back at the next board meeting and just start discussing the possible funding sources.
And then just, I guess, a general question for perhaps Tyson or Burley or Superintendent Watson. Since the cost of the furniture in the multipurpose room, boardroom, can that be staged out? I mean, the project can move forward without the furniture in place because it's not ready yet. Can that be something we look at later? Or is it better just to get funding for the whole project? Or make the decision to fund the project to the amount listed in the proposal and sort out those kind of smaller details at a different time?
Yeah, I think as far as if the line items that I kind of went through earlier, that'd be the one line item we could do that with, if the board chose to do that. It won't hold the project up at all. I think my main goal was not to have this conversation again. But if we could look at it either way.
Anyone else have any questions? Seeing no more questions, then the recommendation is that the trustees approve the increase in budget in the amount of $365,888 to cover the, in many cases, the unexpected costs that were discovered when the remodel started, and that we would have a conversation, most likely at the next board meeting, to identify the specific sources of funding. So is there a motion to that effect? Moved by trustee, or question, or? Yeah, you can make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the increase in budget for the amount excluding the PA system, the chairs and the tables in the boardroom. So whatever that amount remains, it'll be about 75%. And then, yes, so that's my motion. We can determine the funding for that portion later.
Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by trustee McDonald. Is there any board discussion? Trustee Lorenzen?
I guess I'm just, as always, uncomfortable stripping us too low in our available cash. And the idea that we would be doing it to pay for ourselves is a little hard to swallow. And I'm still reeling from the 52,000. I thought 5,200 sounded okay. And I honestly, I've been in this room when it's not a board and we're not on TV, and you don't really need the speakers in this room. So I would like for us to just move forward without that until we could get by with these or something. I'm just really not comfortable going out for that money right now, and especially if it puts us into our permissive levy and monies that could be used for education. So.
Any other board discussion? Well, I'd rather have the PA system included rather than excluded, but that's why I asked about the furniture, since that does seem like it's something that we can look at later and keep money going toward our primary purpose, which is to educate kids or students. So anyway, so I support the motion that's on the table.
In your motion, didn't you say you wanted to spend $92,000? Oh,
No, so we're looking at $365,888 increase. Right, less the 92,000.
so you said less than $92,000.
Yeah, subtract the 92,000 from that, so you get a different number, which is, Jennifer? So anyway, we'll be somewhere in the $200,000 range, but
It probably is a good idea to identify the money, the dollar amount we're approving under the motion, or we would be approving if we vote for the motion, so.
Do you want the amount? 273,880 is what I do in the math.
that's the number I had in mind.
Trustee Kendall?
Since our motion is a little different from the one that was in here, can we continue to ask questions about the motion?
Sure. I mean, every time there's a recommendation from administration, they make the language, and trustees should be
Yeah.
be free, so.
Okay.
Sure.
So I
This is
heard-
more discussion time than question time, but go ahead.
Okay, well, this question wasn't relevant. I mean, it didn't come up until the new motion. So Burley mentioned that the price of the PA and mic system was $40,000 a year ago, and it's $50,000 now. Does that concern you, Trustee Lorenzen, about, I mean, I'm happy to support the motion. It seems like a reasonable way to move forward. But if it continues to go up at that rate, is that going to make it more expensive in the long run?
And so in general board speak, that's just a comment you make, so instead of addressing trustee Lorenzen directly to answer the question, but on the other hand, since it's your motion, you can speak back to that comment.
Well, I have a comment to make. So that's like about a 25% or more increase in a year. And as a rule, electronics go down, not up. Now, I don't know if we're looking at the tariff, not anymore. Well, I'm not know if we're looking at the tariffs or whatever, but wow, that's just seems like a lot of money for us, we could raise our voices or use these old things. I just feel like we haven't Well, it's just so much money. And yeah, it went up for 25%. You know, maybe it could go again, maybe we could scale down, I don't know. But we won't know if we just go ahead, so.
And trustee comment, trustee Oldperson?
I think one of the things we need to look at is that the sound system does help those who need access and those who actually are not here that really want to hear our conversations, the single moms or, the parents who work. I think we got to keep that in mind too, that the sound system does help access.
Board trustee Newbold?
I think this is a question and a comment. Is that okay?
Well, not typically so, because that means who are you asking the question of?
Burley, a question and
Sure.
then a comment. Do we anticipate that there are opportunities for a better sound system cost? In other words, like, have we exhausted our options exploring prices, or that the cost would go down? I guess, and then accompanied by that is my comment, which is, I think if we're talking about taking this sound system over there, it's not efficient and doesn't work well. And although I have a ton of sticker shock over a $52,000 sound system, I think we need some improvement over this.
Burley, do you want to can you predict the future?
So I'm not sure that I got exactly the question you were asking. Can you say it one more time, maybe?
So have we explored all options for sound system cost? Like, is there anything out there that's like a different thing that would work that's potentially less?
So we did, and we only talked to one company, and it was kind of to get us this base number. It's a local company, and we bought this system from like 20-some years ago, whatever it was. Yes, we did look at, when I got the same sticker shock, and so I asked what other options we would have. That is a true wireless system that works off a frequency, is what I'm being told, and not off a infrared. And so other ones that work off infrared systems, and when you put them in a larger room, like that room, they don't always communicate very well to each other, and you might lose them sometimes. And I think that's part of what we're trying to get away from. We also had a gentleman come in and speak about ADA sound and being able to get to those with ADA issues in regards to hearing, and it's hopefully something would be integrated in that system. I got to admit, I didn't ask that, but colleague Hatton reminded me of that. So it's something to consider going over there. This system does not allow it all.
Any other board comments? I have one final one. Hearing the points made by trustee Newbold and trustee Oldperson, I would be in favor of a different motion that would include the sound system, but excludes the furniture. It's just, we have to vote on the motion as it's worded right now, and then if it doesn't pass, we can vote on an amended, or a different motion. But I initially indicated that's why I asked about the furniture, because I was hoping we could hold off on that, so. Sure.
The $365,000 includes the $92,000 for this, right? Okay. That's all I want.
So is everyone clear on what the motion is for now? I mean, what the motion is that we'll be voting on? Okay? And is there any public comment? Seeing none, and I'll rely on trustee thank you, trustee. Superintendent Watson. So the motion on the table is that the trustees approve an increase in the budget for the administration office remodel and determine the specific source of funding at a later board meeting, and that dollar amount would be $273,888. Everyone's clear on the motion? Okay. So all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. And it is trustee McDonald, trustee Kendall, and trustee Lorenzen in favor. All those opposed? It's trustee Sturbis, trustee Oldperson, trustee Holland, trustee Newbold, and trustee Wake opposed, so the motion fails. So the chair would entertain any other motion that addresses this. Trustee Wake?
I make the motion that we fund the amount and $365,000, is that correct? Is there any change? Okay, what he said.
Is there a second? Second by trustee Sturbis. Is there board discussion on the motion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of the motion that is on the table, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is trustee Sturbis, trustee Oldperson, trustee Holland, trustee Kendall, trustee Newbold, and trustee Wake in favor. All those opposed? Trustee McDonald and trustee Lorenzen opposed, so the motion passes. And so with that, we'll be operating under the assumption that most likely at the next board meeting, we will discuss funding sources and identify the funding source that we'll approve. Trustee Wake?
Is there a possibility that you can get information from the Intercap people about their loan and what would be required for us to do that, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. That's been a suggestion made by trustee Lorenzen too, so I appreciate those suggestions. So then we move on to B1, to approve the elementary school calendar for 2020-2021. And the calendar in the packet, there is a revision made because it inaccurately identified the end of a quarter, I think, and so you should have a new elementary and middle school calendar here.
I'd be glad to go ahead and explain the differences, so if you like. So why don't I go ahead and address, we can discuss both of them. I see that they're both separate items, but I first want to acknowledge the calendar committee. It's a committee comprised of both teachers, elementary, middle, and high school, and administrators. We had Casey Laslovich, Melissa Shepard, Scott Shook, Beth Cole, Casey Ballou, Vinnie Giamona, and Jennifer Courtney participating, and so I wanted to thank them. One of the other things I would note this year that was interesting is the teachers on the committee had actually taken kind of straw polls and done some inquiries and surveys with their staffs at their respective schools, so that kind of helped form our conversations and our discussions. So the second thing to Trustee Hollins, that we have, the calendars in the packet had a couple modifications. So first off, we had inadvertently somehow shifted the Memorial Day weekend up in May. So it had, on the calendar in the packet, it shows the 21st off and the 24th, when it should have been the 28th and the 31st of May. So that was made on both the high school and the middle school calendars. The only other modification that would be different, that would be hard to catch, on the elementary and middle school calendar, the third quarter date was changed from March 5th to April 2nd. That corresponds with the number of days. Each quarter runs about 45 days. So that was the only other modification. Everything else looks the same. So overall, what I can tell you, one of the interesting things about the calendar is they always repeat themselves. So this is, in 2015-16, this was the exact same look. And so we tend to use that as a model where we start. And what you would find is this calendar pretty much corresponds with that, with the one exception, which would be spring break. And that was probably the most talked about issue that we had this year with the calendar committee. To give some clarity, in 2015-16, the spring break would have been scheduled on this calendar April 5th through April 9th. What's happened in the interim is that when the university went away from the intersession in January, they moved up the spring break, and so it's much earlier than it has historically been. So this year, as you see, it would be 3 weeks earlier than it had been the prior time when we had a similar type of calendar. We are not willing, or haven't been as the committee, we've debated to make that break with the university, with 11,000 plus students at the university and the number of families that we have that also have relatives, kids, or associations with the university. It would be a significant impact. So this year we are again in line with what the university did. The plus, Superintendent Watson had actually reached out to Seth Bodnar at the university. I have reached out to the registrar, and I'm hoping within the next few weeks, maybe by the end of February, we're going to work with them at looking at making revisions moving forward into the future. They actually have their calendars done all the way through 2023 right now. So our hope is that maybe we can meet with them and talk about making some other revisions. The why is because when you have spring break that early, one, it's really not spring. Two, it pushes up our conferences. It makes an incredibly long time from March through the end of the year without any really noticeable breaks for students or staff. And so it's nicer if we can move that back even a week or so. So that's one of the things moving forward. I just want the board to know that we are working and partnering with the university to try to coordinate our schedules. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about specific dates or conversations that we had.
Any questions for Dave? Seeing none, then we'll take them as separate items just because one impacts K-12 and one impacts the entire district. So the first recommendation is that the trustees approve the revised elementary 2020-2021 school year calendar, which is making Memorial Day be on the right date and the other day off associated with it, and switching from March to April, the day when the quarter ends, to April 2nd. So with those revisions, is there a motion to approve the revised elementary 2020-2021 school year calendar? Moved by trustee Kendall. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee McDonald. Is there any board discussion? I just want to say thanks to the committee and thank you both to Superintendent Watson and Dave for reaching out to the university to have that conversation, because it does impact, I mean, it is a big shift by moving spring break back 3 weeks, because the university gets out on May 5th, or the first week in May, and yet our students go until June. So thanks for continuing that conversation. Any other board comment? Any public comment? Seeing none other than a thumbs up. So all K-12 trustees in favor of the motion to approve the elementary 2020-2021 school year calendar, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all K-12 trustees. And then we come to the parallel recommendation that the trustees approve the revised high school 2020-2021 school year. So in this case, it's just getting Memorial Day on the right day. Is there a motion to approve the high school calendar? Moved by trustee Wake. Is there a second? Second by trustee Sturbis. Is there any board discussion? Trustee, you'll have to remind me of your last name. I know your first name.
Morrow.
Okay.
I was just curious as to the typo on August 31st, Professional Development Day. Is that possible to change after we approve this schedule?
It's missing an N, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you.
You have a
Mr.
career
Roth,
as
there's
an
one more.
editor.
Mr. Roth, there's one more problem with your calendar.
Good catch. I think just because
Actually, we're
that's a
changing it to
spelling.
development into the future. It's one of our new revisions, so thank you. Thank you for catching that.
Very much. Yeah. I think we can correct typos without revisiting the motion. So, and remind me, Lenora, do we have a seconded motion? I think we do. And board discussion, I think that's where we were. Student trustee discussion. Any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of the motion to approve the revised high school 2020-21 school year calendar, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we come to approving the Montana High School Association Cooperative Sponsorship of Activities Renewal Agreement with Frenchtown High School for swimming. And Karen, we've entered into this agreement at least
twice.
Yeah, so if you want to remind us.
Yes, this is an agreement between Big Sky and Frenchtown, and it allows students from both high schools to swim together on the swimming team. And I did have a chance to talk to Cameron Johnson, who's the assistant principal at Big Sky, who relates most to the activities and athletics. And Cameron did say that this is really a very successful collaboration, and that it really supports camaraderie and an esprit de corps among students across schools. So it's not typical, but it's very successful.
Thanks. Any questions for Karen? Seeing none, then the recommendation is that the trustees approve the cooperative sponsorship renewal agreement between Big Sky High School with Frenchtown High School for the sport of swimming. Is there such a motion? Moved by trustee Wake. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Newbold. Is there any board discussion? I'll just say thanks to Cameron for reporting back that it is so successful. It's good to hear that information when we're considering taking action. Any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of the motion to approve the cooperative sponsorship renewal agreement between Big Sky High School and Frenchtown High School for swimming, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. And then we move on to 4, which is to approve on first reading Board Policy 8550, Cyber Incident Response. And so, Ray, I think this is your topic, so if you want to kind of walk us through the proposal.
Yeah. So MTSBA and our insurance provider have recommended that we adopt a cyber incident response policy. Basically, this policy defines what a cyber incident is and formally establishes a cyber security incident response team. I just want to mention that my team and I are fully prepared if and when we do have a cyber incident, and in fact, my team and I have recently attended some trainings provided by the Department of Homeland Security and Texas A&M on cybersecurity, and we will be attending another training, a more extensive training related to recovering from a cyber event. So this is basically just a policy that formalizes what we would do, and then we'll develop some in-house procedures after that. I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Any questions for Ray? Trustee Lorenzen?
Well, the language is complicated, so one question is, was it referred to you this way, or is this a recommended language? And in the third line of the first paragraph, it says you're going to minimize loss of destruction. I'm not sure if that meant loss of instruction, or what does it mean?
Okay, so this is the recommended policy by MTSBA, and minimize the loss of destruction. So the data that were destroyed, that would be the minimizing the loss of destruction, or loss of server destruction, or physical hardware. Could be a whole host of things, depending on what the incident was.
Any other questions? Trustee Olperson?
Can you give an example of a cyber incident?
So an example of a cyber incident could be someone, user error. So a user clicks on a phishing link. I don't know if you've been seeing those emails from me lately, but a scammer sends a phishing email, a staff member clicks on it, enters his or her credentials. Now the spammer has a real user's credentials. They can then gain access to our network, and then the goal of these spammers, I don't know what we want to call them, cyber terrorists, I don't know. Their goal is to then move laterally through our network and continue to try to increase their credentials. So try to get admin level credentials to then steal information. They could be putting ransomware on our servers where then they would be locked and we wouldn't be able to get in. And then they would be asking for money. So there are many things that can happen, but usually the thing that we've been seeing the most lately would be the spammers trying to not harvest credentials, but to get people to buy gift cards for them. Mm-hmm. So recently, the last few days, we've had people spoofing emails. So that means that they are creating a generic email, like a Gmail account, and then putting a principal's name in as the viewable name. And then a staff member clicks on that thinking it's from the principal. And then the requester is asking them to purchase a gift card and then send them the information back so that they're able to use that gift card So the scams are sometimes really elaborate, they're sometimes very simple, but that would be an example.
Any other questions? I have just a couple. So under the responsibilities of specific staff members, the first item says all users of district computing resources shall honor district policy and be aware of what constitutes a cyber security incident. Does that include students?
That's a great question, and it wasn't defined in the recommendation from MTSBA. We have separate acceptable use agreements for students on what constitutes their use of the district network, and we kind of put that in layman's terms, as in, I will not download anything, I will not use someone else's usernames and passwords. So I think it should be all users in this case, and maybe we could make some modifications to say something about specifically students, but I guess that's your call.
I just asked because we were having a discussion earlier about a different policy which described what students can and cannot do, and yet if a teacher or an employee engages in the same behavior, you don't know where to look in the policies to find it. And so here it makes it sound like it's staff members, and then the word users is broader. And so just, if there should be some general policy that controls students, and then procedures can be developed that don't need to be in a board policy. So I wondered if maybe you and, I don't know, Megan or Bia could look at whether users is the best word to use in that one paragraph, because I don't want to wordsmith it, but it just seems pretty broad and hard to decide whether it applies to other people in the school, like volunteers who might be using a computer to help. I mean, when I was a library aide over at Helge Elementary, I was typing into a computer all the time, book codes and things like that, so I'm using a computer and have access to it, but I'm a volunteer. So just clarifying this, because the title is staff members and doesn't cover anyone who can access computers. So, and I'm assuming this language under this also came from MTSBA? Correct. Okay, because I guess the other question is, to some extent, it seems a little detailed to be in a policy. If we change the title, a job title from the Director of Technology to something else, that we have to come back to this policy and change the title name, or if we have a person whose job title changes from Director of Communication to something else. So I was just thinking maybe some of this language could be moved to procedures to follow, so that each time there might be a switch in personnel involved in the cyber incident response team, that we wouldn't have to come back and revisit this policy. So just, but that we would establish a response team, whose members will be determined under a policy or something. Does that make sense? So.
It does make sense, and I do think our insurance provider does want us to have some specific procedures with people and clearly identify who does what during something like this. So even if it's just putting in like the superintendent or his or her designee, I would recommend that. But I think they clearly want us to outline who the members of the team are, and we could definitely make that generic in saying information technology supervisor, staff, or something of that nature. I totally get what you're saying. The part that we didn't include, there were, Superintendent Watson can help me out with this, but I think there were about 50 lines of procedures that we excluded from the policy that were super detailed, so.
I wonder if there could just be a discussion with you and your staff, and perhaps Superintendent Watson and legal counsel, about which part falls better under procedure and which part follows better, or if there's a little bit broader language we can use. So keeping the point of the adoption of this to make sure that we address it as it is recommended. So.
Would you recommend then just keeping the part that just defines what a cyber incident is, and what a cyber incident is, and there will be a response, and then put everything else in the procedures?
That's my first inclination, but I guess on a broader note, is it appropriate procedure just to not take action tonight and to let you and administration and legal counsel take a look at it one more time before we send it out for public comment, so that we know that it's clear what the public is commenting on. Or Trustee Lorenzen, did you have a comment?
Well, you could say for technology users, everybody, district information technology director or equivalent, and wherever you have a title like that, you just say or equivalent, and then we would have covered all the bases. I hate to take anything out of it that the MTSBA has recommended, especially if the insurance carrier wants specifics.
And they want this specific language?
They like this specific language, and then they have a very, I brought it with me, detailed, like, what they want the procedures to look like after that. So, and the insurance policy is, just so you know, the cyber insurance policy covers about $2 million, and then it helps us with the forensic analysis. It would help us with the data recovery, if there's any, what's the word I'm looking for? I wrote it down because I knew I wouldn't remember. Extortion. And then, yeah, it's not one you think of every day. Yeah, extortion, and then helping with, if there is identity theft, then continuing with that monitoring. So I do want to make sure that we follow what the insurance policy wants, just because it is pretty significant in how they help us.
So would it still, would it still be okay to send it back just to add in some of the language that Trustee Lorenzen is saying, to make it sure it captures it, and bringing it back one more? Is there a sense of urgency that we act upon it tonight for first reading, or could we do it at the next meeting? No urgency. Would that be okay? So I'd entertain a motion to table it until the next meeting? Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Sturbis. The motion was made by Trustee Wake, and so all those in favor of tabling it, just to clean up a little bit of the language, but now we understand the importance of having the policy in place. So any more discussion about that motion? Any public comment? 2 thumbs up. So all those in favor of the motion to table it, and we'll see it again, hopefully, if the time allows you guys to look at it, that we would see it at the next board meeting. Okay? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. And it's unanimous as to the motion. And with that, we take public comment again on any non-agenda items. Any public comment? Seeing none, we didn't quite get done at 7, but pretty close. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for being here.